Drawing an egg. If I asked you to draw an egg using dots on a page to create negative space, it would take you a while, and we would hear the tap, tap, tap as your pencil created dots all over the page around the empty space of your egg. If I asked you to draw an egg using a single stroke of your pencil, you would draw a smooth oval in 1 second and have your egg. The standard coaching method is as follows. You vaguely describe what you want. You then tell your learner what you don't want. You tell them why not to do what you don't want. And then you hope that your learner is going to figure out what to do eventually by telling them more of what you don't want them to do. And starting to see it this way over time has really just brought the incredulousness, I guess, in my mind when I see coaches taking that approach. It's like, why did this become the standard protocol for coaching? So our ingredient number 5 is precision instructions. One of the biggest realizations I've come to over time is that by removing half of all communication that coaches spend their time on, the negative side of telling their learner what not to do, what they did wrong, etc., the results and effectiveness of coaching can be dramatically accelerated. And what some of our players' parents have called getting more coaching in 30 minutes than my player got in 3 years on their team. So really what I've concluded is that everything you do to point out what the learner did incorrectly, describe what went wrong, describe what not to do, all that is a waste of time. That is the negative space approach to drawing an egg. And what your player really needs is the precise instructions of what to do, the equivalent of a single stroke of a pencil. My journey with precision instructions began back in 2016, learning about TagTeach, which is a methodology created for improving learning through concise instructions and precision feedback. What I like to call the ultimate communication shortcut. It's really how we've come to use it. The TAG of TagTeach is an acronym that stands for Teaching with Acoustical Guidance, which simply means you are guiding your learner by giving them a simple, precise auditory sound as feedback to tell them, yes, you did that correctly. This method has a deep background in psychology and human behavior, specifically what's called ABA, or Applied Behavior Analysis, the in-depth study on how people learn and how humans learn, specifically at the most fundamental level. Really, that positive reinforcement for behavior produces more of that behavior. The definition of a reinforcer is a really important part of this, which is any action that will cause the behavior to be repeated more frequently in the future. And so we are taking that approach of designing instructions to set up the student for success and then reinforcing that success so that it will happen again. And in basketball, reinforcement is pretty easy. Saying yes is kind of a bridge to tell them yes, 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 you're doing it correctly until the ball starts to go through the basket, or until they see whatever outcome of visual confirmation of success that they need, and then it's kind of self-reinforcing from that point on. If you get a player to make a left-hand layup where they could never make one before, once you get the technique working to where the ball goes through the basket, they're going to do more of that because the ball goes through the basket every time. So what I found is if you can get good at describing more and more precisely as you improve the instructions you give, the better chance the learner has to execute them. And then the more chances they execute correctly, the more you get to reinforce the correct behavior, which dramatically accelerates that player's ability to learn. And when they're learning small chunks very quickly and learning how those fit together, it allows us to build a very large, complex skill set incredibly fast. The textbook TagTeach methodology has you use a device that makes a click noise, like you'll see for clicker training with animals, and you would use that to mark or tag the behavior right when it happened. What I've found over time is that most of the players we work with in the 8 to 14-year-old age range, their auditory processing is very good. And so the word yes just makes it a lot easier. It's a little bit smoother than having something in my hand when I'm trying to pass or demonstrate. And it's also a distractor in some way. Like the player's looking at, what is that thing in my hand? What's the noise it's making? It requires some more explanation, where if I do the job of setting up our instructions correctly, then just saying yes tells them all they need to know when they've executed it. And a lot of that saying yes has to be done in a very consistent manner. So delivered with as consistent of a tone and cadence as I can do is what I've arrived at as the ideal tool to give the player confirmation they did something correctly without even the tonality difference that would cause them to question, what was different that time. If I say yes one time and yes the next time, they're going to wonder what was going on there. And so saying yes, 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 same tonality, same cadence every time allows that to replicate what we would get from the click with both the precision and the consistency factor. The power of the instantaneous feedback is really where I've found this to be a most useful tool, the most powerful communication shortcut I've ever come across. And I like to think about how it's a lightning bolt in a way. It's connecting three different parts of the brain in that instantaneous yes. The moment I say yes, it's stacking up those layers of reinforcement. So the first one is visually. Having seen a demonstration from a third person perspective, right? Player watching coach demonstrate it, and then seeing where they are in space on the court and what it looks like from a first person's perspective when they do it themselves. Physically, what we'd call the kinesthetic sense, what it feels like, the sense of body movement that the player has in that moment. And then auditory, what the instructions sound like as a description, and then that confirmation of yes when they do it correctly. So we're setting up a lot of the framework with our instructions so that when they do it, visually, kinesthetically, auditorily, they get that lightning bolt cutting through all layers of the brain at the same time, and it's like, boom, I've got it now. All that just made sense. I heard it, I saw it, and I felt it all at the same time, and now I know what correct action feels like. And really powerful moment. You might experience that, 3 or 4 times with a player in a single session, where it's different pieces of the skill, and they're struggling with the whole skill. They're breaking down pieces with us to struggle through, and then finally get it on that piece, and they get 2 or 3 or 4 of those pieces connecting, and they got it, mastered it, at a really deep level by having all 3 of those layers again connected like a lightning bolt in that instant feedback. And when they start to stack those pieces that they feel they have mastered the sense of what that is correct action completed, then their motivation to practice more and their learning acceleration curve just starts to take off. It's really exciting. So again, when the coach has described and demonstrated the skill for them, so they have the visual picture and the mental framework of what it looks like, they have a kinesthetic sense of what it feels like, and then they hear the auditory confirmation of yes, you did it right. That mental, physical, auditory picture is captured, and it sticks with them. Unlike a lot of practice where they might fumble around in the dark, is kind of how I look at it, or again the negative space approach. Like coach might be pointing at all the things not to do, and there's this big image of what they think it should look like. Even if they get it a couple times, that's probably going to fall away before they come back to practice it again, even a day or a week later. And what we've seen with this approach is that it sticks, right? They've mastered it again at that deep fundamental brain level. So when they come back even 2 weeks or a month later, it's still there. Like we say it the same way, we set it up the same way. they do it the same way. And even if it faded a little bit, it's back very quickly because that deep sense of understanding. And so using this, we've arrived at the concept of talking about delivering results in 30 minutes or less, right? To get a result in the skill that a learner is struggling with, and hopefully one that's going to provide the most leverage impact, which is something we're always after. It can take minutes, instead of hours or weeks or months or years that, parents are accustomed to seeing for a player's skill to really develop. We can get things accomplished in literally minutes. For example, we can often get a player that's never made a left-hand layup in their entire life to go from absolute beginner to achieving a made left-hand layup that not only looks good from our coaching perspective, it feels good to the player, and it will stick, right? What we just talked about with the lightning bolt approach, they're going to be able to continue using that skill for the rest of their basketball life. And we can get that done in literally 10 minutes or less if it's isolating one skill. So we've come to talk about delivering results in as little as 30 minutes because we can often take 2 or 3 or even 4 different skills that we come across in the process of a 30-minute evaluation where we typically start with players. And those skills that we just randomly come across, while we're searching through what the player's skill level is in evaluation, we randomly come across 3 or 4 different points that could really be a difference maker for them, and we can essentially correct those, master those small chunks for the player inside of a 30-minute evaluation type workout. When we go to the more intentional curriculum approach to progressively connecting dots of skills that go together in basketball naturally, then that takes off at an even higher rate. How much we can get done in 30 minutes is really incredible using this approach. And again, the lasting impact factor that the player's ability to execute those skills correctly, once they've spent 10 minutes on a skill, they can come back months later, and even in games, that skill will still be there. It's still in action the way we worked on it, and maybe it needs some refinement or it needs connected to a bigger skill set, but that piece is really there forever once they've hit that lightning bolt connection of, again, the auditory, visual, kinesthetic sense of what that small piece of a skill looks like, feels like, and sounds like. So, to summarize the importance of precision instructions, the simplification of instructions and the reduction of words just by eliminating all the negative what not to do side of things, right? Eliminating the negative space, drawing an egg with dots that takes forever and is really vague and really hard to follow and still ends up with maybe an approximation of what the skill looks like. Number 2 is providing the instantaneous feedback with a simple yes, right? So Tag Teach is all about setting yourself up for success with the concise instructions so that all you need is yes to accomplish the feedback the player needs to understand when they've got it right. The lightning bolt realization, again, just stacking those 3 different layers in the player's mind. When they get it right, they feel that it's right, and they hear yes all at the same time. Really has an amazing impact. And then the factor of lasting results, right? Having that lightning bolt realization in every skill they're working on really starts to build a huge skill set. And when all of those are sticky, so to speak, they are staying with the player. They are retaining that ability, forevermore. Really has an amazing impact, amazing results. So that's what's got me excited. We've been using Tag Teach for 8 years now, and working on my level 3 certification at this point. Starting to do some national and some international workshops and webinars on this topic, especially applied to decision making, where I've spent most of my time lately is how to use this instruction approach with making decisions. But really fantastic methodology. Again, I like to just describe it as the ultimate communication shortcut. If you're a coach or a teacher, teaching any skill whatsoever, then I recommend looking into this. The more you can get your instructions to be concise and your feedback to be precise, the more accelerated learning you're going to see from whatever students you're working with.